Again, I made this introductory lecture by Raul, but I got my main point from his presentation, and I think my concept could be somehow addressed also in relation to constituency, but I will try it maybe in the end. But I thought that generally would be good to present such a concept because it's a part of my work in progress, larger work, because actually it's a part of the book I'm trying to finish now endlessly. Why I came to this concept and why I thought that it's important to think about. So actually, maybe even the choice of the word is not completely perfect because continuity, but basically, it's in a sense, it's very close to what I'm going to say. It could be also used as sort of continuum, also more mathematical, physical sense, also, and so in terms of unfolded, uninterrupted presence or unfolded, sort of continuous, incessant process. Yeah, all these things. But just for the reason of not to think about this too much, I stopped at this continuity. And basically, also actually, as how it's related to my context and to my Что делать collective, which is actually emerged on the ruins of Soviet communism, and these ruins were quite toxic, and at the same time they sometimes were very inspiring. What is important to somehow to relate to this communist legacy of the sort of real communism, which was indeed real because it actually was the only real communism we had until now. So, I mean, in terms of exactly an attempt to institutionalize communism in a way of producing sometimes very damaged or somehow very perverted for institutional forms for this communism, but it's the only occurrence of realization of any communist ideas. So where I was thinking, even I'm curious even in Stalinism, but of course not in the sense of its sort of acceptance. But so it was extremely a lot of these paradoxes. And generally, I was thinking about this constituent power and generally about this framework of Italian post-operaism, which I was following and I was publishing, I was translating Paolo Virno in Russian and editing and a lot of other stuff, but still I feel myself more critically distanced from this sort of set of ideas. And first of all, mostly not in the terms of analysis of capitalism, which is brilliant and which is lacking in many other currents in contemporary critical radical thought. I think this part is very much acceptable, but other things which is related to understanding of political process and even constituent power, I still feel some doubts about this. Basically, for example, again, the potential critique would be exactly the same as was addressed to Deleuze, for example, who was actually criticized as a sort of anticipating actually arrival of this new post-68 capitalism and somehow mimicking its forms in what he was doing. And for example, the same could be addressed to the concept of constituency, which is actually the neoliberal term, which is somehow used. For example, I'm working here in the university, and the word constituency means that just clients, so students who pay for education, is this meaning of the word actually here. So in a sense, yeah. So still, I think it's important to reappropriate these words appropriately. This would be the first point. So and also generally about institutionalization, institutional deinstitutionalization, because for example again this post-communist space is completely informal, deinstitutionalized. Everything is how to say deinstitutionalized. Every Soviet institution was destroyed, but they were somehow replaced by this sort of micro web of various shadow informal relation, complete informalization of labor, and so on and so on. So in this condition, you would rather dream about some institutionalization of proper work relations, for example, or proper conditions or proper rules for of the game, for example. Yeah. So in this condition, exactly what. So and this is extreme case of neoliberalism. It's also part of bigger neoliberalist picture. So I think that basically this stressing the moment of rather process of constitution than its outcome of result as an institution or as constituent power, not as a constituent but as a constituent power. In post-communist condition is also somehow controversial in the sense that we're already in permanent constituent process, but this is constituent process rather a capitalism than any sort of alternative to it. So this is just improvised reflection based on these points. And basically, why I was thinking about this continuity, concept of continuity, was the moment when also somehow linked to recent debates about various forms of leftists so trying to approach this quite already an intolerable stance of this continuous unfolding after collapse of communism, in a sense, continuous unfolding of this neoliberalization of social life, of privatization of institutions, and so on and so on. So basically, both in activist circles and in theorists, you can just finally have this phantasm of a final catastrophe which could end capitalism, or you could have a sort of fantasizing of some acceleration, very fashionable now, accelerationist position should somehow accelerate the technical advances, so capitalism just to lead it to final collapse or something like this. So this is a sort of a completely apocalyptic thought about like a Agamben was like these end times and this all this stuff. But so I saw that basically it would be more important, productive to reverse the question and ask rather how capitalism continues and what is the basic operative model of this continuation. Basically, and also this was linked to this big topic of introduced by Russian French philosopher Alexander Kazhev, which linked to the idea of end of history, but in a sense, of course, criticizing this very conservative point somehow used by Fukuyama. Actually, completely misunderstood this concept by Kazhev, who actually thought about the end of history in relation to Stalin. So he thought that Stalin is the end of history. So basically, he was this, and he is compared with Napoleon, because he brought this universal big state, which is sort of this thing which gives equal recognition to all citizens and so on and so on. So Stalin was in a sense. So it's, you could say it's better to have liberal end of history. I have some doubts. But dialectically somehow Kazhev is right, because this momentum of collapse of communist bloc and Soviet Union somehow introduced this strange non-teleological sequence without end. Yeah? So dialectically, not structurally, not in the sense that this was triumph of liberal democracy or neoliberalism, or in the sense that it was sort of end of history, just nothing important, interesting happens and so on. But rather this introduced a very specific temporality of non-teleological kind, so which is really based on lack of the end, and exactly based on process and then on the end result. It was everywhere. And like because I was asked to provide some art examples, my art example would be time-based art, which is based on process without end result. This is like also quite hegemonic form of art performance in 90s. It's complete coincidence. And in terms of politics, Occupy movement, actually exactly the same non-teleological movement which was widely discussed. I followed some of the discussion in American Occupy, and for example, and there was a lot of critique of this sort, but from various thinkers, like on the one hand Judith Butler, who somehow welcomed this new sort of non-teleological politics, which is unfolding through this sort of spotlight or sparks of occupations, and they disappear. So there is no integral project, there is no sort of big teleology, and so on and so on. On the other hand, people like, Jodie Dean, she criticized this point, saying that, okay, you have a lot of these spots, but what then? What will be the end result? What we will have? Or we will just exercise this opportunity to gather together in a square, and so on. So in this sense, so in a sense, I was interested in this sort of moment of non-teleological continuity, which somehow still unfolds, not being the end of the history, but somehow unfolds. And that's why I thought about, for example, many contemporary diagnoses of this situation, which also somehow implicitly stress this moment of continuity. For example, the same Agamben, who insists on state of exception which turns to be permanent. So this is also continuous state. So even exception becomes continuous in these conditions. Or, for example, I don't know, he actually reiterated Benjamin's phrase about the state of exception which turned to be permanent. So it continues. Everywhere is now proliferating this continuity model, which is very widely distributed, like continuous education, like continuous, so everything you should learn until you die, like, without any hope to not to learn anything. Yeah? So, this incredible uninterrupted media flows, internet, or what is usually tagged as 24/7 society. So this is actually best example of this interrupted continuity of production, consumption, exchange, communication, and also observance and control. So this was my sort of prerequisites of my thinking about this continuity concept. Actually, and also this strange temporality. Actually, once I wrote a sort of essay called No Time, about this new contemporary temporality, which actually leaves you as a subject. So the result is these big machines or apparatus of continuous unfolding of the same capitalist machine. But what happens with subject in this condition? And of course, it's like a very strange subject produced by this machine. First of all, they are you can observe it among cultural sector or academia. It's permanently time pressured people who are reacting on this in various ways, sometimes through this notorious concept of procrastination, somehow captured in this as a sort of reaction to this. And this is interesting sort of no time temporality, some temporality which actually suspends the very experience of time we have. Yeah? So sometimes you feel that you have no time, but it's not just a phrase, but it's actually a structural model of this temporality. So then I tried to find some genealogy of this concept after thinking about all this. This genealogy actually is very Marxist. Anyway, we arrived to one. So basically, it's also from Grundrisse, and this is actually was somehow overlooked, I think, in analysis of Grundrisse, because actually Marx used the term continuität or die Kontinuität des Produktionsprozess. So it means the continuity of production process. And in many occurrences scattered in his text, he addressed to its key importance of this continuity. For example, but it's not codified as a term in Marxism. If you will check any Marxist dictionaries, like Georges Labikagic Dictionary of Marxism, or any others, or Wolfgang Haug Dictionary of Marxism, there are no such words, and this is strange also. So, and for example, in also not just in Grundrisse, but most intense in Grundrisse. So he says, for a quote from Volume 2 of Capital, continuity is a characteristic feature of capitalist production and is required by its technical basis, even if it is not always completely attainable. So Marx says of continuity is both practice and it's somehow ideal model of capitalist production. So you can find this continuity operative on many levels. First of all, on the level of production, by which Marx means continuity of work, of labor process. Continuity of work is somehow accompanied by continuity of machinery, which was somehow achieved in 19th century with due to invention of assembly line, late 19th century. So somehow machinery, as Marx stressed, somehow keeps this idea of model of continuity, allows it technically. So also in distinction between production time and labor time, you know this distinction which was important actually in post-Parismo. So there is a labor time, which is actually a concrete time of your labor, and there is a production time. For example, you are doing your project proposal, which is 1 page, but you write this 1 page for 1 hour. It's actually a concrete, observable level. But there is a production time which includes some cycles of your life, your thinking, and so on and so on. This is time is continuous. In terms generally, Marx addressed this concept in the chapter which is called continuity of production, because you know that Grundrisse was actually the text which were actually discovered by Soviet Marxist Ryazanov, who actually bought this text on the market, because German Social Democrats completely ignored this text. It's like a crap laying in the underground of one of the socialist leaders in Germany. So basically, and the titling and the whole division of the text was actually introduced by editors. So continuity of production process presuppose suspension and circulation, what Marx calls circulation time. This is also in Grundrisse. That's the title of the chapter. So basically, continuity implied on the level of exchange, not just production. Exchange means that you should minimize circulation time of commodity to produce more value. But generally, this rule also can be extended to the whole production process of and fixed capital, what Marx called fixed capital, so machinery, all these firm assets of capitalist production. So machines cannot stop, otherwise you waste your value. So you cannot stop the machinery, otherwise you're just wasting the value. Yeah? So this is actually, this growing of fixed capital or machinery also somehow determines of the importance of continuity of production. Basically, so on subjective level, it's a subjective category of labor, of continuity of working operation, but also on many other layers this continuity is implied. So finally, Marx arrived at a very beautiful formulation, which I also very briefly quote. Hence, the continuity of production becomes an external necessity for capital with the development of that portion of it which is determined as fixed capital. For circulating capital, an interruption, if it does not last so long as to ruin its use value, it's only interruption in the creation of surplus value. So I just skip a couple of lines. So finally, he used even Latin term, saying the continuity of production process corresponds to the concept of capital is a conditio sine qua non, so necessary condition for its maintenance only. For its maintenance. So basically, this is the model of continuity, and also very important point: the credit. The credit is also based on continuity, because Marx actually has also a nice discussion of credit system in Grundrisse, and the credit also how to say he says, I quote, the most that credit can do is maintain the continuity of production process, and all its and if all other conditions of this continuity are present, if the capital is to be exchanged with actually existing value and so basically, what is function of credit? If you don't have enough money to produce cars, you borrow money to continue production of cars. So, and this is extremely relevant to contemporary neoliberal financial capitalism, which is somehow implies this model of continuity, exactly credit, exaggeration, huge bubbles of credit actually based on this model which became incredibly powerful now in my view. So what is financial capitalism is exactly this regime of continuity of capital, and that's why the importance of credit and various derivatives which actually can capture even future continuity, somehow provide the continuity in the future, secure the continuity in the future. So this is a sort of what I was trying to research through this concept. So, and I think that basically continuity should be distinguished from other Marxist terms like reproduction, because reproduction is first of all addressed to the labor force and its reproductive capacity in maintenance, but also of course reproduction to institution of capitalism themselves. But still, I think continuity is something different from reproduction, because somehow it is operates on the level of rather abstract model. Production is every time very specific to various areas. So, and also should be distinguished from what was discussed in 90s as real subsumption. So we could say that, of course, capital is actually his structure of which is exactly this. In Capital, for example, the first volume, Marx says about 24/7 already. So it was anticipating all contemporary debate about 24/7. The Capital strives to 24/7, 24/7 consumption of surplus value. So this is, but still, I think this model is somehow maybe has some roots or genealogies which somehow predetermine the capital itself. This would be my another hypothesis. That's why I think that it's not just real subsumption when capital fully unfold or impose a model of continuity of its production of the whole society. So I think it could be distinguished from real subsumption too. And to find these more deeper roots of this model, which probably could have even pre-modern roots, pre-capitalist roots, and somehow determine this whole functioning of capital. I'm doing a lot of references. I outline a lot of various philosophical models, but it could be even discovered in Christian theology, in this model of continuity, in the idea of creatio continua, continuous creation. So this is also very important idea, which was somehow developed in late Christianity, actually, because the whole idea of early Christianity was creatio ex nihilo, so creatio instantaneous creation, which is rather act than process. But then it was shifted towards the idea of in early modernity, there's the idea that creation is continuous in the sense that God still intervenes and manages the process. So it's a big manager who is never withdrawn from the world. Yeah? So he still manages the process. And somehow the shifts on not initial original creation, but on the process of continuation somehow unfolds further. For example, in contemporary debates of theologists, you can find the idea that evolution is a creatio continua. So it's also somehow intervention. So and in modernity, I would say that these things are separated. So there is creatio and continua somehow separated. This model somehow dissolves. And in a sense, continua goes to the side of the whole internal teleology of capitalist production, and creatio somehow linked to sort of resistant process. Yeah. So I think it's like a secularization of this concept. So basically, I have a lot of other references, but might be later in discussion. I also was thinking how it could be related to counter continuity, because also I share actually the idea that modernity is somehow split into the dominant capitalist model of modernity, but also there is a resistant model of modernity. alternative modernity. This is I completely can share. And somehow interesting to think about how continuity could be used as a counter-capitalist or terms in a way, because even in Italy you can find this lotta continua, the idea of continuation of struggle, somehow opposed to continuity of capital. But I can just leave it here.
Thank you very much. Should we, any agencies or should we?
Urgent question.
I was just thinking that there is no alternative, which is the ultimate continuity slogan, no?
Yeah,
Conservatives.
no, exactly.
In relation to the concept of tendencies, there is a question of the way in which this idea of continuity enters in a relation with the concept of tendency in Marx, and therefore, there is all the debate with the neoclassical marginal revolution and how mathematically you define the permanent tendency, and how actually what you have.
Yeah, so actually it's very interesting because Marx, his later manuscripts, and this was about maths of curves and various mathematical curves. I tried to read this manuscript, and this was exactly about the problem of continuum in maths, his latest manuscripts. And he learned himself for 10 years because I read the Soviet edition of this late Marxist mathematical manuscripts published in the late 60s. He's a professor of 2 professors of maths. But it's really difficult to get through that because he was quite educated mathematician in the end of his life. And he tried actually, the main focus of his work was the problem of continuity and curves in maths. So all these things. So he tried actually, for him it was also the problem of infinite small accumulation of surplus value, but also the idea of continuity, because of exactly infinite small is the idea of continuous since Leibniz, since this early modern thinking.
But somehow what is interesting to me is that in the marginal revolution of the neoclassical economics, the attack on Marx and the way in which they try to abstract the economical production from the class struggle goes to these ideas of a continuity and the marginal utility of the individual. And what Marx tries to do is to retake from Leibniz and so on the way in which tendency becomes a way of
yes, exactly. This would be
of territorializing
exactly
the class struggle
I think a tendency could be considered exactly as a term of counter-continuity, a sort of prediction or a sort of trying to grasp the sort of opposite flow or opposite continuity, and so in this sense it's very science and definitely Marx, he gives all his not predictions but sort of prognosis or prognostics. It's actually not in terms of stupid laws of history but in terms of tendencies, and exactly this. And tendency also, I think it's somehow the term tendencies will be interesting. The story of the term tendency, it will be interesting to look into this, because I'm sure that it's also based on the idea of sort of unfolding curve in a sense. No.
And just always in terms of relation.
Maybe we continue.
Yeah. Let's continue.
Yeah, let's continue. It's about